Yo, what's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Coffee Pot. My name is Shishi Zed.
Drink the coffee, it'll make you feel better.
So, guys, it's no secret. Men aren't rushing to get married today. They just aren't. They've seen the data, they have looked at the numbers, and they're asking themselves, wait, what is in this for me? What can I benefit from getting married today? Now, we can talk about how most men want women who lean towards the more traditional type of woman. And we know most women today are anything but that. Or we can talk about how family court often treats men unfairly, but we're not going to focus on that. There's nothing more convincing and frightening to men than to hear the thousands and thousands of countless stories told by other men who have pursued marriage, horror stories of what other men have gone through after getting married and then going through a divorce, which the majority of the time will be initiated by the woman. And listen, some of these stories you hear about what men have experienced while going through a divorce are literally mind-blowing. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to some of the most horrific divorce stories I have heard, and they'll be shared by expert divorce attorney Lindley Richter. Grab your coffee. You're going to need it. Let's get it.
Dad was paying child support of about $750 a month for 2 children based on his income of $50,000 a year.
Okay.
Well, about 2 years into his child support obligation, he ended up inheriting a large sum of money, about $1 million, when his grandparents passed away. Mom got wind of that and hired a lawyer and took Dad back to court and asked for an increase in child support, claiming that that inheritance that he received should be included in income to increase Dad's income, thereby increasing his child support obligation. Well, the court agreed, and what the court did is took the amount of money that he inherited, divided that by the number of years that the children would be minors and he would have a child support obligation, and then increased Dad's income by that amount. Dad ended up having to pay child support now based on $150,000 a year of income when you included that inheritance in there. What do you think about that? Do you think that's fair? About a year ago, I had a case where a father of a child that had been born out of wedlock was ordered to pay child support, about $500 a month. And he had paid that child support for about 4 months until the parties got married. In other words, he married the mother of the child. And at that point, he stopped paying child support. Well, move forward 10 years and they're getting divorced. And guess what?
Surprise.
The child support office now comes after him for all of those arrears, over $50,000 worth of back payments, even though he was married to the mother during all of that time.
What?
Well, that case went to court, and guess what? The judge ruled that he, in fact, owed that money.
Oh, my
Well,
God.
move forward a year. I have another case, very similar to that case, where the father was ordered to pay child support, paid it for a little while, then the parties got married, then they got divorced, and the child support office came after him for that entire arrearage. But in this case, we had a different judge, and this judge decided the case on principles of equity and fairness instead of strictly on the law. Very interesting, because the cases were almost identical, but the outcomes were polar opposites. One judge followed the law, the other judge followed her feelings, her heart. She knew that it would be unfair to saddle that guy with that much child support when he had been living with that mother, married to her, and raising that child. It's a very interesting contrast. But it goes to show you that many times who you have as a judge makes all the difference in the world. Judges are human. Some judges will rule one way, other judges another. In these particular cases, the judges ruled completely opposite. But that happens. What is your remedy when that happens? Well, you can take it up on appeal, but I think in either one of those cases, the Court of Appeals would have probably affirmed the ruling of each of those judges because they were both right in their own respect. Dad got custody of his son when his son was about 10 years old. Dad raised his child, fed, clothed, and sheltered him, didn't get any child support from Mom. You know why? Because he didn't want it. He just simply wanted to raise his son without any hassles, without any kind of problems with the mother. Mom would get visitation when she wanted it. Didn't get that much, but did get some, but never paid child support. Well, move forward 5 years. Kid's now 15 years old. He wants to go live with Mom. He and Dad got crossways about some things, so he figures he'll give Mom another shot. So mom gets custody of the kid. Guess what? The first thing mom does is goes down and puts dad on child support.
Oh my
Even though
goodness.
dad never put her on child support when he had custody, first thing mom does, put
This
dad on
coffee
child
smells
support.
like
So now
shit.
dad's paying about $850 a month in child support for this 15-year-old kid
Insane.
that he raised without any help from mom for the last 5 years. Just doesn't seem fair, does it?
Female nature.
Dad was paying mom about $650 a month in child support. Problem was is that when the child support was set, mom was only making about $12,000 a month. That was 3 years ago. Now she's a college graduate and she's making $60,000 a year. Well, Dad called mom up and said, look, you're making more money now. I need to lower my child support. I should only be paying about $300 a month. Mom disagreed and said, no, I want the full $650. Well, Dad had to hire a lawyer, take mom to court. They fought it out in court. When all the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the judge agreed with Dad and set the child support at the amount of $350. Now, here's the problem. There's a little-known statute that says that Dad cannot get attorney fees from mom if mom is receiving government assistance for child support purposes. Dad ended up having to pay mom's attorney $2,500 for having to go to court to lower his child support.
Wow.
Doesn't seem fair, does it?
No.
Dad, you want to hear something crazy? Put yourself on child support. If you're the father of a child born out of wedlock,
That's insane.
You need to put yourself on child support as soon as possible after that child.
This is what we've gotten to.
If you don't, it's going to come back to bite you because at some point
You have
in the
to put
future,
yourself on child
You're going to be
support.
put on child support. Either the mom is going to put you on child support or the state is going to put you on child support. Chances are you're going to be on child support at some
This
point.
coffee smells
and if you
like
wait
shit.
too long, then you're going to have a huge arrearage, 25, 50. Biggest one I ever saw was a $120,000 child support arrearage for child support that was never paid that should have been. Now, I'm going to tell you something really crazy. Even if you're living with the mother of your child and you guys are in love, not married, but in love and living together, put yourself on child support. If you do that in that situation, it's kind of circular. It comes right back into the family.
Free game.
But if you ever break up with her, there's no question that you paid child support, and that's important. Do you think you can change somebody after you marry them? A lot of people think they can, but very rarely do. You know, I've heard the old adage, if you want a better wife, be a better husband. Or if you want a better husband, be a better wife. I don't actually think that's true, though. Very rarely do I see people that are able to change somebody just by changing themselves. There are exceptions, but most of the time you can't do that.
Some
Most
sound
of the time
advice.
you're going to be stuck with whoever it is you married.
Facts.
A lot of people go into a marriage thinking, well, I'll change these bad traits about this person, but they end up not doing it. You know, we go through a dating period usually before we get married, and that's the time period that we learn who that person truly is. And once you learn who a person truly is and understand that you can't change them, then as long as you're satisfied with that other person, then go ahead and marry them. Otherwise, you better not. A number of years ago, I had a client that fell into what I call the child support black hole. What that is where a father will get behind on his child support. In this case, the father owed about $600 a month in child support for 3
Sheesh.
kids from 2 different women. That was his ongoing child support. Well, he began to fall behind because he would lose jobs. He would get jobs that paid cash and he wouldn't pay the money to child support. He even did a little stint in jail for DUI. Well, when the grim reaper of child support finally showed up at his doorstep, he owed about $40,000 in child support, back child support, arrears.
Wow.
There was no way he was ever going to be able to pay that. Well, what the child support office did was every time he would get a job making money at a factory or a company, they would issue a wage assignment. And with that wage assignment, they would take about 50% of his earnings. So if he was getting paid $12 an hour, child support would take $6 of that $12. And after taxes, that would leave him about $3 or $4 an hour to live on.
Could you imagine
and that's
that?
not enough to live on.
It's ridiculous.
His incentive to make money and to pay child support was completely shot. It was gone.
Of course.
His incentive to be a father was gone because he couldn't provide for his kids. So he rarely saw his kids. He wasn't really a father to them. What he ended up doing was dropping out of society. He got menial jobs, making cash money. If he did get a job at a factory or someplace that would report his income and his employment and a wage assignment issued, he'd quit and go work somewhere else because he couldn't handle only getting $3 or $4
It's sad.
an hour. I don't know what the answer is in that case, but when he hits 80 years old, if he's still alive, he's going to owe tens of thousands of dollars in child support.
That's terrible.
What I mean by that is he'll never get it paid off. What do you think the solution is to that? If there is a solution, and there may not be. And I believe that all parents should financially
change the laws,
support their
maybe,
children if they're able. But when you put somebody in that big of a detriment as it relates to child support, they're going to lose all incentive to be a father, to be a provider for their kids. What do you think the solution is? You got any ideas? John's child support almost doubled without him even realizing it. The way he found out is he woke up one morning, checked his bank account, expecting to see a deposit for $1,350 for payroll, and instead it was only $800. He had been paying $650 a month in child support for 3 kids for the last 6 years. Well, child support office wanted to increase that. They thought he was making more money. So they filed a motion with the court to increase his child support and sent a copy to his last known address. Problem is, John had moved and hadn't given them his new address. When it got to court, child support said, we mailed him a copy. Judge said, okay, he's not here. So what the judge did is increased his income by 10% each year, which the statute allows. That increased his income for child support purposes substantially, which in turn increased his child support from $650 to $1,200 a month. Wow. You know, John could have avoided all this if he had only given child support office his new address when he moved. Tom and Jennifer had been married for about 3 years and had known each other for about 4 years. Jennifer had a 2-year-old daughter named Madison when she started dating Tom. Madison was 6 now, and she and Tom had grown close. They both wanted Tom to adopt her. Madison's natural father had been out of the picture since she was about a year old. Now, although he was ordered to pay child support, he hadn't paid any support or even seen her since Jennifer and him broke up. He owed about $35,000 in back child support. Once his parental rights are terminated and the adoption goes through, he's not going to owe any more child support going forward, but he's still going to owe the arrearage, the back child support. The adoption went through without a hitch, and after that, Jennifer started to pursue the back child support through the child support office. As it turned out, Madison's father had been injured on the job and had a pending workers' compensation case.
Oh, no.
The state child support agency placed a lien against that workers' compensation settlement, and when his case settled, guess what? Jennifer received the entire $35,000 in back child support.
Christ.
Now, it's important to keep in mind that although child support
This coffee
terminates
smells like shit.
when the parental rights of a parent terminates and there's an adoption, what was owed prior to that is still owed and can still be enforced and collected.
Nightmare.
In this case, the state continued to enforce the child support arrearage and collect it, even though father's parental rights had been terminated. Now, although the $35,000 was technically Jennifer's, she and Tom agreed to put it in a college fund for Madison so she could go to college when she turned 18. In a lot of cases I've handled through the years, adoptive parents will simply abandon whatever child support arrearage is owed by the natural father and go on with their life. What would you do in that case? Would you pursue the back child support? Would you place it in a fund for the child to use when the child turns 18? Or would you simply abandon the money and move on with your life? Or would you take the money and use it for yourself, which you have a right to do? Did you know that if you're found to have committed an act of violence against the other parent of your children, that your parenting time will be limited by the court? Here's a common scenario. 2 parties that are parents of children get into an argument. It becomes physical at some point. The police are called and you're arrested and taken to jail. Now, you may be found guilty of domestic assault, or you may have an order of protection put against you for those same acts of violence that form the basis of the criminal charge. Either way, you now have a finding by a court that you committed an act of domestic violence. And the law in Tennessee, as in most states, requires the court that sets custody and visitation to limit your parenting time based on either the order of protection or a finding of guilt in a criminal case. Be very careful with these orders of protection and with pleading guilty in criminal cases
Very common.
to acts of domestic violence, because it can and will affect your parenting time. I had a case a few years ago where the dad was working at a big company as a mechanic, making good money, almost $100,000 a year. Well, he did something wrong. He falsified records and he ends up getting fired. Well, there's a child support case pending at that time. And so when the case went to trial, we were able to show, and I was representing the mom at this time, but we were able to show that he was fired for misconduct, and that when he was fired, he was making close to $100,000 a year. And we were able to argue that the court should use that amount as his income for child support purposes.
Wow.
The court agreed.
No
Here's
way.
the situation. When you have lost your job because of some fault of your own, either misconduct or whatever the reason, the judge is still going to be able to use the amount of money that you were earning at the time of that misconduct, the time you were fired,
Nightmare.
as your income for child support purposes.
That's
You
insane.
think that's fair? John was a 55-year-old senior airline captain making over $250,000 a year. He had a 6-year-old little boy, and he was on his third marriage. He had just finished paying child support for his 2 oldest children who had
Third
aged
marriage?
out,
Come on,
and
dog.
had just finished paying alimony to his second wife. Now, all of a sudden, his third wife, the mother of his 6-year-old son, has filed for divorce, wants to get out for whatever reason. Well, he's fed up with the system. He's disgusted. He's jaded. He's been paying child support and alimony for the last 25 years.
Damn.
He's tired of it.
Poor guy.
So what does he do? He quits his job so he won't have to pay child support or alimony. Bad decision on John's part. Here's the deal. If you are capable of making money, that's what the court is going to look at. Your earning ability, not what you're actually earning. So when John quit his job as an airline captain, guess what? The judge is still going to count that as income, the amount that he was making as an airline captain, because
Wow.
he quit that job voluntarily. And believe it or not, on his exit interview, what did he tell the interviewer? That he was quitting because he was sick and tired of having to pay alimony and child support.
Sounds like he just
and when
gave
the
up.
judge saw that, he really had no choice but to impute that income to him, the income he was making as an airline pilot. Yeah, he ends up having to pay $2,100 a month in child support. Doesn't seem fair, but at the same time, it does seem fair, doesn't it?
No.
Why doesn't the court
doesn't.
require the parent receiving child support to give an accounting of where that money's being spent? It's a very good question, and I don't know that I have a good answer for it. You know, most parents will tell you that they don't like paying child support to the other parent because they have no control over what happens with that money. And many people believe that the other parent is wasting that money, spending it on things other than the children, and many times that's the case. You know, in
Nails,
guardianship
hair,
cases,
weave.
if you're appointed a guardian over a child and over the estate of that child, you have to give an accounting every year as to where that money goes, a detailed accounting. Why don't we require that of parents who receive child support?
Gynocentric
You know, in divorce
society.
cases, at least in Tennessee, when we file a divorce case, there's an injunction that goes in place that requires the other parent, or really both parents, to give an accounting of where all the money that they spend goes, and to provide that accounting when requested by the other party. I think the court should require that in the case of child support as well. Mom was pregnant when she got married. Her husband knew it wasn't his biological child, but went ahead and accepted the child as his own anyway and signed the birth certificate, thinking, hey, we're going to live together from this point forward.
Beta
We'll
move.
be one big happy family. He was wrong. They separated
Surprise.
after a year. The problem is nobody filed for divorce. They didn't have the money at the time. He went his way, she went hers. They each started dating different people as if they were never married. Well, she ended up having 4 more children over the next 10 years, none of whom were his biological children.
This coffee
and they were
smells
all by
like
different
shit.
guys. So now she's got 5
Different
children,
guys.
5 different guys, none of whom are his biological children.
Sheesh.
The problem is the law presumes that they are his children.
304.
So now if he files for divorce, he's going to end up owing child support for 5 children, none of whom are his biological children. And he runs the risk of having to pay retroactive child support back to the date of separation.
Damn.
What he should have done is he should have filed for divorce when he separated. That would have been the easy solution. Now he's got a much more complicated problem. If a judge puts you on child support, only a judge can take you off of child support. I'm going to say that again. It's that important. If a judge has put you on child support, only a judge can take you off of child support. Here's what I mean by that. Take a typical situation where you'll have a child born out of wedlock. The mom and dad are together when the child is born. They separate. Mom puts dad on child support, goes to court. The judge sets the child support, bangs the gavel, says, Dad, you got to pay this amount every month through the state. All right, move forward a couple of months. The parties get back together. Mom goes down to the child support office and says, hey, I want to take dad off child support. Well, the child support office stops enforcing child support, but they can't take dad off of child support. Only a judge can do that. What should have happened is Dad should have petitioned the court and said, hey, we're back together.
Free
Take
game.
me off of child support. There'd be a hearing set before a judge. The judge would have then taken Dad off child support.
Free game.
I had a case a few years ago. I was representing the husband. It was about a 10-year marriage. And throughout that entire marriage, the wife was the one that was responsible for paying all of the bills. Husband worked, wife didn't. Wife stayed home with the kids. Wife took care of the business of the house, including paying all the bills. Problem was is she wasn't paying the bills. Husband had no clue. He didn't care anything about the finances. Well, it turned out that she hadn't been paying the house note. And guess what? The house went into foreclosure. That's when he reached out to me. That's when he found out there were real problems going on with her. Folks, the takeaway from that is you've got to keep up with the finances. Whether you're the one writing the bills or not, you've got to know what the bills are. You've got to know what's coming in, what's going out, what credit cards are being used. I see so many times in so many cases, one spouse being in control of the money and the other one having absolutely no clue. He had to file bankruptcy in that case, completely ruined his credit.
Nightmare.
John was the father of two little girls, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, when he and his wife got divorced. He was ordered to pay child support of about $800 a month. This went on for about 8 years. 8 years into the divorce, the oldest child turned 18 and graduated from high school. John at that point felt like his child support should be cut in half and he should only be paying $400 because now he was only going to be supporting one child. What he didn't take into consideration was the fact that the guidelines, at least in Tennessee, as in most states, don't cut child support in half. For each child that you have in addition to the first child, you pay less and less of a percentage of your income for that additional child. Well, he didn't take that into account, nor did he take into account that his income had increased substantially over that 8-year period. John ended up paying $950 a month in child support for one child. In other words, his child support increased instead of decreased.
Horrific.
John was the father of two little girls, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, when he and his wife got divorced. He was ordered to pay child support of about $800 a month. This went on for about 8 years. 8 years into the divorce, the oldest child turned 18 and graduated from high school. John at that point felt like his child support should be cut in half and he should only be paying $400 because now he was only going to be supporting one child. What he didn't take into consideration was the fact that the guidelines, at least in Tennessee, as in most states, don't cut child support in half. For each child that you have in addition to the first child, you pay less and less of a percentage of your income for that additional child. Well, he didn't take that into account, nor did he take into account that his income had increased substantially over that 8-year period. John ended up paying $950 a month in child support for one child. In other words, his child support increased instead of decreasing. I know why you don't like to pay child support. It's because when you pay that money over to the other parent, you lose control. You lose a say on where that money's going to be spent. It's not that you don't want to support your kids. Of course you do. You want to buy them food. You want to make sure they're sheltered. You want to make sure they're clothed properly. But when you pay money, hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars a month in child support, you lose a say in how that money's spent. And the other parent could spend it on cigarettes, on alcohol, on all sorts of things.
Nails.
And there's really not much you can do about that.
Back massages.
Except in very rare cases where maybe money's being spent on drugs, illegal drugs, the court is not going to get involved. The court's not going to require an accounting of the other parent on where that money's spent.
That needs to change.
So you lose control over where the money's spent. And that's why it's so difficult to accept paying child support to the other parent. Bob and Julie got married in the state of Kentucky, where they continued to live together for about 10 years. Then Bob became disenchanted, left the marriage, left Kentucky, moved to Tennessee. When he was in Tennessee, he met a woman and he fell in love with her. Problem is, he didn't tell her about his marriage to Julie, and he knew that if he filed for divorce against Julie, that she was going to make it very difficult and drag it out. Bob wanted to marry his new girlfriend, though. So what he did is he went to court in Tennessee, filed an affidavit claiming he didn't know where Julie was, had looked for her but couldn't find her. So the court ordered publication of notice. After about 60 days, he went to court. He got a default judgment divorce against Julie. About 30 days later, he married his girlfriend. Well, somebody saw pictures on the internet of the two of them together, told Julie about it. Julie did a little investigation, came to Tennessee, hired a lawyer, got the divorce case set aside. That meant he was still married to Julie. That voided his marriage to his girlfriend. Dad was a neurosurgeon making about $500,000 a year. Mom, on the other hand, was only making about $50,000 a year. They had a 4-year-old little boy. Now, this was in 2003. They went through a divorce, and the court granted father custody of the little boy. Mom got about 120 days of parenting time. The real kicker came, though, when the court went to calculate child support. In 2003, the courts were using what's called a straight percentage method for calculating child support. And when they did that, they only looked at mom's income, since she was the non-custodial parent, and took a percentage of that income and set child support. Mom ended up paying Dad $850 a month in child support. We'll move forward a couple of years.
Beautiful.
The law changed in Tennessee. Now Tennessee uses an income shares model where the court looks at the income of both parents. Mom went back to court, asked for a modification of child support based on that new law, and guess what? She left with Dad owing her $1,900 a month in child support going forward. Don't adopt your stepchild until you understand the legal ramifications of the adoption that you're about to
Free game, man. Listen up.
And that you are willing to accept that responsibility. Most cases of step-parent adoption are wonderful. A bond between the child and that step-parent is established.
Stop trying to save these single moms.
Raise that child. But when you adopt a child, be it a stepchild or any other child,
you're a beta.
You are establishing a parent-child relationship with that child as if that child were born to you and that child was your biological
You're not
child.
a beta. Just think about it, man.
You can inherit from that child and that child from you. You can be legally responsible for the actions of that child in certain situations. You might end up having to pay child support. You can get custody and visitation rights once you adopt a child. So as long as you understand what you're doing, it can be a wonderful thing. But just make sure that you understand
most likely
all
not
of the legal ramifications before you take that step.
This coffee
It will
smells
be in the
like
child's
shit.
best interest and yours for you to do that. I was in child support court a couple of weeks ago, and the case in front of mine involved a father who was working 2 jobs. One about 40 hours a week, the other between 15 and 20. He was making about $65,000 a year, and that was his income for child support purposes. The problem is that mom was only working 20 hours a week, a third the time that dad was working. She was bringing in about $25,000 a year, and that was going to be her income for child support purposes. Well, dad's attorney argued to the court very eloquently that the court should impute mom's income at $75,000. If mom's only working 20 hours, that's a third of what dad's working. So if you multiply 3 times the $25,000 that mom was bringing in, that'd be $75,000. Seems only fair, doesn't it? Well, the court didn't buy it. The court kept mom's income at $25,000 and dad's at $65,000. Dad had a huge child support bill. Doesn't seem fair, does it? John got behind in child support and spent 8 months in jail. Can you believe it? What had happened was he missed a few payments of child support, and his ex-wife took him back to court on a contempt charge. The judge heard the evidence, looked at him and said, "You've just simply refused to pay. You've had the ability to pay. You've just willfully refused and failed to pay. Therefore, I'm going to lock you up until you pay the child support that's owed." It was about $2,500 that he was behind. So the judge locked him up, and instead of paying the money, he took the attitude of, "I'll show this judge." So he ended up sitting in jail for 8 months until he finally came to his senses and paid the child support that was owed. You know, on a contempt charge, a judge can lock you up and put you in jail for an indefinite period of time until you make a purge payment. In this case, it was
Horrific.
the entire amount of the child support that was owed. That's perfectly legal, happens every day. Dad left about a year before mom filed for divorce. When dad left, he continued to pay the bills. He continued to pay the electric bill, the phone bill, the cable bill, all of the bills of the house he continued to pay because that's what he had always done. Now, mom worked. They had 2 kids. One kid was 3 and one kid was 5. Well, when mom filed for divorce, dad decided on his own that he wasn't going to pay any more bills. Why should he? Mom's filed for divorce. They're not going to get back together. Mom's living in the house. She's enjoying the electricity. She's got the kids. Why should he have to pay the bills? So he didn't. Well, guess what? The electricity got turned off. That was the wrong move on his part. How is he going to explain to the judge that he allowed the electricity to get turned off in the house after his wife filed for divorce and after he had been paying those bills for a whole year? It's not going to go too well for him. Guys, be careful when you do things like that. Don't knee-jerk once a divorce is filed, decide you're not going to pay anything. That's the wrong move. I have a common scenario that comes up all the time. Dads call me up and they'll say, hey, I hadn't seen my kid in 2 years. Well, my first question is, why not? And usually they say, Mom won't let me see my kid. Well, do you have a court order? Yeah, I'm supposed to have every other weekend. Well, what the hell have you been doing for 2 years? Well, I don't know. She won't let me see my kid. Look, if you've got parenting time with your kid and you're not getting that parenting time because someone won't let you have that parenting time, you better take that person back to court and get them held in contempt so that they understand that this is your parenting time.
Free game.
Here's how I look at this. If you're given parenting time by a judge every other weekend from Friday at 6 to Sunday at 6, and on your weekend at 8 p.m. on Saturday, you don't know where your kid is, then you're neglecting your child, because that child is your responsibility during your weekend that the judge has given you parenting time. And if you're not taking care of your child during that time period, you're neglecting your child. So an old client calls me up the other day and he says, hey man, I've got a child support hearing coming up in a couple of weeks. Can you represent me again? See, I'd represented this guy a few years ago and I'd gotten him parenting time with his kids. The mom had been denying him time, so we went into court and we got parenting time. He got every other weekend, standard visitation, and that's what he wanted. So I asked him, I said, well, how are your kids doing? How's your parenting time going? He said, I hadn't been getting my parenting time, man. I said, what the world's wrong, man? How come you haven't been getting your parenting time? Why didn't you call me about that? He said, well, I just don't like messing with the mom. She just makes it so difficult for me to exercise my parenting time.
Very common.
Look, guys, if you're given parenting time by the court and somebody tries to mess with that parenting time, the other parent or whoever, go back to court on a contempt. This is your time with your kids. Don't let anybody mess with that time. You have an absolute right to visit with your children. Jerome had been bad. So bad that he had to go to jail for 10 years. When he was in jail for 5 years, his wife, who he had married before he went to jail and never divorced, got pregnant, had a baby. Now, Jerome had been in jail for 5 years, so it couldn't be Jerome's baby. But under the law presumes that that is his child.
Oh,
and the only way to change that is through DNA testing. So what Jerome's wife had to do to disestablish paternity in Jerome,
now that's crazy,
was to have a DNA test that excluded Jerome as being the father of that child.
This coffee
even though
smells
he was
like
in jail
shit.
when that child was both conceived and born.
wow.
So when she wanted to put the biological father on child support, she had to first disestablish paternity in Jerome and then establish paternity in the biological father. I see this happen all the time, and it can be expensive. And
Some guy can be busting your wife's cheeks while you're in jail,
in situations like that.
and now you're paying child
Moms,
support.
don't use children as pawns. I get calls all the time from fathers telling me that mothers are refusing to give fathers parenting time with their children, absent a court order, when the father has maybe done something wrong or said something wrong or hadn't done something the mom wanted the father to do. And so what the mom does is withhold the child. And I've seen it happen for months at a time until father can finally get the money together to hire an attorney and go to court and rectify the situation. I'm telling you, this usually is moms that do this. Moms, when you do
Thanks for
that,
keeping
you
it
put
real,
yourself
Emily.
at a disadvantage, and here's why. One of the factors the court is going to look at in determining custody, visitation, parenting time, etc., is the propensity of both parents to foster a relationship with the other parent. And when you're acting like that and you're holding the child away from the other parent, the father, because he hadn't done something or has done something, you put yourself at a real disadvantage.